Hey everybody, it's nutritionist Amy Berger from 2itnutrition.com bringing you the next installment in doing keto without the crazy. Today's topic is another viewer request. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I do take requests, so if there is a topic you'd really like me to cover, send me an email, 2itnutrition@gmail.com. Do not leave it in the comments on YouTube. I can't keep up with the comments, so I can't guarantee I'll see it. If you have a topic you absolutely, positively must have me talk about, send me an email. Other than that, before we start, as always, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for watching. We're well over 8,000 subscribers now. It's mind-boggling to me. I don't know how long it took me to get 8,000 people reading my blog. So I've been blogging for like 7 years, and even now some of my posts don't get 8,000 views. So anyway, also as a reminder, there's new tabs on my website, 2itnutrition.com. There's a tab that says Meet Me in Person, and I have all my upcoming public appearances where we can meet. Come say hello if you're in any of those local areas. There's events, 2 events in Canada and 1 in Brazil. So check those out if you're watching from overseas, or Canada is maybe overland. It's not really overseas, from the US anyway. And also as a reminder that Dr. Eric Westman's Page 4 diet is available for sale on my website, and I am an affiliate, so I'll get a couple of cents if you buy Page 4, which is the simplest and most straightforward, least complicated way to do keto effectively. Okay, on to business. Today's topic is keto safe for kids. So this is a touchy subject, and so I have to remind you that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician, I'm a nutritionist. This is not medical advice. This is just information. Take it for what it is. Okay, so I want to start this off by saying that a friend of mine who's very well known in the keto world herself, but I won't give her name away, she posted a picture online of her son's breakfast. And it was something like bacon and eggs and avocado. And the backlash that she got was just nuts. It was like, how can you feed your child that? It's so much fat, you're killing him, you're clogging his arteries, ah! And she was thinking, where was the outrage when I was feeding my son Pop-Tarts and Mountain Dew? Where was the outrage? How nice of you to be concerned about my child's welfare now that I'm feeding him eggs and bacon and avocado and real food. Where was your concern? Where was your outrage when I was letting him drink liquid sugar? Where was your outrage when he was consuming 100, 200 grams of sugar in a sitting, in minutes? Nobody says boo about that. So when people say, is keto safe for kids? Is keto safe for a child? How come nobody ever asks, is sugar frosted breakfast cereal safe for kids? It must be. They market the hell out of it to them on TV, don't they? How come nobody asks, is it safe for my 6-year-old child to walk to the convenience store and get a 2-liter soda and drink that in the parking lot? That's legal. Nobody's complaining about that. Nobody's up in arms, outraged over that, right? So what's the problem here? Here's what I hear when somebody asks, is keto safe for kids? And it's totally cool to ask. You're right to ask. You're right to be concerned. Obviously, there's many thousands, if not millions at this point, of adults worldwide successfully following very low-carb or ketogenic diets. That doesn't necessarily mean it's safe for kids, so it's fair to ask. I'm not saying it's a stupid question, but I'd like to reframe the question, okay? Here's what I hear when somebody says, is keto safe for kids? Is it safe for my child to eat meat and eggs and poultry and vegetables and cheese and cream and nuts? Is it safe? Is it safe for my child to eat beef and broccoli? Is it safe for my child to have a piece of roast chicken and some zucchini? You see what I'm getting at here? What I'm getting at is, why wouldn't it be safe? Why wouldn't it be safe? There is nothing that a human being, a human animal of any age, well, I shouldn't say any age. Infants are different, right? A breastfeeding infant is different. Their GI tract is not fully developed. Talking about children, not newborns, okay? There's nothing that we get from sugary, starchy foods that we can't get from low carbohydrate foods, right? There's a lot of debate now in the carnivore world and in the keto world as to whether dietary fiber is required in the human diet, as to whether vegetables and fruits or plant matter of any kind, including nuts and seeds, including plant oils like olive oil or avocado oil, whether any of that's required. I'm not here to debate that. I'm not here to tell you yes or no. I'm just saying that what we do know is that there is nothing you can get from plant foods, or I shouldn't say that, from high carbohydrate foods that you can't also get from low carbohydrate foods. So let's say if vitamin C is required, you don't have to drink orange juice to get it. You can get vitamin C from bell peppers, green peppers, red peppers loaded with vitamin C. You can get vitamin C from spinach, from broccoli, from other lower carbohydrate foods. Fiber, oatmeal, steel-cut oats, and whole wheat muffins and bran muffins aren't the only things that have fiber. If you've ever had a dietitian tell you that you need that stuff for fiber, they need to go back to school, because spinach has fiber, cauliflower has fiber, almonds have fiber, you know, any non-starchy vegetable, kale, whatever, cabbage, fiber, fiber, fiber. And, you know, in terms of other nutrients, potassium, calcium, magnesium, B vitamins, whatever, selenium, there's nothing that you can get from a high carbohydrate food that you can't get from a low carbohydrate food. Now, getting back to the kid-specific issue, I got to consult the notes or I'm going to go way off the map here. Is keto safe? Like I said, it's a fair question. And it's a fair question because if you look at some of the research, some of the actual published, you know, medical and scientific literature, there's suggestions that it's not safe. However, the concerns about children and adolescents following a ketogenic diet come from the early days of epilepsy diets, ketogenic diets for epilepsy. In case you're new to the ketogenic world, newsflash for you, the ketogenic diet or even very low carb diets were not intended, they weren't originally, you know, designed to be weight loss diets, to be diets for type 2 diabetes, to be diets for PCOS or cardiovascular disease or fatty liver or any of the other things we know it's really good for. It was designed to treat refractory or intractable epilepsy, meaning epilepsy that did not respond to any other treatment. And it was also, the ketogenic diet was actually kind of developed for that specific purpose in the 1920s, before there were even anti-seizure medications. There was nothing, there were no treatments for epilepsy basically except fasting or a ketogenic diet. And in those early days of the ketogenic diet, they were very concerned about some specific issues, so it was a much, much stricter diet than it is today, even for epilepsy. Like in those early days, those children, there were a lot of problems long-term in those children because of the way the diet was formulated and implemented, and here's why. In those early days, it wasn't just a ketogenic diet. It was a medically therapeutic, super strict ketogenic diet where some of the, it was believed that like everybody needed to be on the 4-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio type diet. And what that means is 4 grams of 4 grams of fat or 3 grams of fat, depending on if it's the 4-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio, 3 or 4 grams of fat to 1 gram of combined carbohydrate and protein. So it was a very, very high fat diet, extremely low in carbs, and also restricted in protein, more restricted in protein than what is considered like the moderate protein now in the keto world, very restricted in protein. Also, fluid restricted. They would restrict these kids' fluid intake sometimes. They also very often started these kids on the ketogenic diet with a fast, like a 3 or 4 day fast. Trying to look at what else. Some of, not so much in the 1920s, but in more recent years, there's a lot of pre-made shakes and formulas for a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ketogenic epilepsy type diet. And if you look at the ingredients on these shakes, they are ketogenic. They are 3-to-1 or 4-to-1. They're very high in fat, very low in carbs and protein, but they're made out of like soy protein isolate or casein protein isolate. You know, the very small amount of starch in it is like maltodextrin. It's got sunflower oil, soybean oil. It's got all kinds of weird crap in it. And we're like surprised that these kids aren't doing so well. Their epilepsy is controlled, but they had all these other problems in those early days, like growth stunting. They were not as tall as their age-matched counterparts who didn't have epilepsy and were just following normal diets. I think that's probably because of the calorie restriction and the protein restriction. We don't really do that much anymore in the ketogenic world, even for epilepsy. And I'll talk about a little more in a minute. Another problem that they saw with these kids on these super strict medical ketogenic diets was kidney stones. Again, why? Probably because they were fluid restricted. Guess what? You restrict your water intake, you might have kidney stones. So the problem isn't a very low carbohydrate intake. The problem is how that's done, how that diet is constructed. Let me see if I missed anything else there. So today, even in the epilepsy world, some people do need a super strict 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 diet. Some people don't. Some people do what's called a modified Atkins diet. So it's still very low carb, but it's a little bit higher in protein. So not quite as low in protein. And some people do an MCT oil diet where they actually have a pretty substantially higher carb intake, not like 40 or 50%, maybe 20-25% carbohydrate, which is much higher than a typical normal epilepsy ketogenic diet. But the reason they can like get away with that much carbohydrate is because more of their fat intake comes from MCT. They deliberately make a lot more of their fat intake from those medium chain triglycerides, which if you don't know, many of you probably do, but if you don't, the MCTs are more readily converted into ketones even when somebody's not on a ketogenic diet, or even when somebody is eating a higher carb intake. If you get MCTs, you will still have elevated ketones. Some people with epilepsy don't even need keto at all. Some people's epilepsy actually gets better with a gluten-free, casein-free diet, which is only free of gluten and casein. It's not even low carb by definition. So the ketogenic diet has come a long way. The research has come a long way. And we have a lot of doctors and specialists to thank for it. There's a doctor named Eric Kosoff out of Johns Hopkins University in Maryland in the US. He's like the world's leading expert in this. There's a bunch of dietitians that are very well experienced and educated with the keto for epilepsy. If you need any recommendations, send me an email, or I'll actually put a link. If you go to the Charlie Foundation, I think it's charliefoundation.org, or I'll just link right to their dietitians. They have dietitians that have been vetted by them specifically for epilepsy, for other neurological disorders. All right, getting off the map again. Back on message. The next thing to talk about, so is keto safe? Yes. When you implement it in a normal, sane, rational way, when you don't do this crazy, unnecessarily strict, unnecessarily, restrictive, crazy, like diet that we know for most people it doesn't need to be that strict. The next question is, does your child need keto? So is keto safe? Yes. Does your child need a ketogenic diet? If your child has no medical necessity for it, then no, they probably don't need a ketogenic diet. If your child has epilepsy, if they have glycogen storage disease, we're seeing really good success with Ehlers-Danlos. Like all of these supposedly untreatable genetic disorders, they don't go away, but they get better with keto. Like a lot of the symptoms just get better. You can't cure those diseases, like some of those are genetic, but you can manage them much better. So beyond that though, if your child does not have a need for keto, then I encourage more of a low carb, paleo-ish type approach. Because, I've said this in previous videos, low carb is a sort of fluid term, right? Low carb is a relative term. Low carb, it's only low compared to something else. So you could do a low carb diet that's not super strict ketogenic. I also talk about paleo because paleo, to me, is a no crap diet. It's not low carb by definition because strict paleo really only prohibits grains and legumes and beans and dairy. And a lot of people in the paleo world don't even really do that strict paleo anymore. They call it more of an ancestral diet because ancestral could include dairy products, especially if they're raw or cultured or fermented, like yogurt, kefir, cheese, stuff like that. And that would also include like beans and legumes and maybe even grains, soaked, sprouted, fermented. I'm not going to get into that whole spiel, but paleo to me is like the no crap diet because if you're going to do grain free, you're not going to eat the cookies and the pastries and the pasta and the scones and the whatever. But you could still have room for things like fruit and sweet potatoes and beets and butternut squash and yams and parsnips and all that kind of stuff. And if you do more of an ancestral approach, again, more room for dairy, beans, and stuff like that. So it's more of like a whole food diet because here's the thing. I do think we have gone too far in the ketogenic community of demonizing carbohydrate across the board. And I've said this in my Alzheimer's talk. I meant to get a copy of my Alzheimer's book to hold up. If you don't know, I've written a book about Alzheimer's disease. It's called The Alzheimer's Antidote. You can find it on Amazon. There is a Kindle version. There's no audio version yet. But I talk about this a lot in every time I give a talk about Alzheimer's because they now call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes or diabetes of the brain. So my book is basically about using a ketogenic or very low carb diet as a nutritional intervention to feed the struggling brain. So whenever I give that talk, I often get the question like, do I need a ketogenic diet to prevent this? Like, is it too late? I'm such and such an age. I've been eating the standard American diet my whole life. Is it too late? And I always say, like, no, I don't think a ketogenic diet is required to prevent or potentially prevent Alzheimer's or metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetes or obesity or cardiovascular disease or fatty liver, all this stuff. I don't think keto is required. So let me backtrack a minute. I say we've gone a little too far in demonizing carbohydrate across the board. It would be stupid for me to say that carrots cause type 2 diabetes or lentils cause cardiovascular disease or, some woman developed PCOS because of parsnips or because of, I don't know, strawberries, right? Like, that's ridiculous. If you look around the world, we have millions, if not billions, worldwide of people who are healthy, they're fit, they're lean, they're active, they age gracefully with all their cognitive faculties intact, and they're not on ketogenic diets. So to say that carbohydrates per se cause any of these cardiometabolic crazy conditions that are exploding now is kind of not true. Like, it's not the carbohydrates by themselves per se. Let me look at this again. Just because removing these foods from your diet helps correct these conditions or helps reverse or put them into remission, whatever you want to call it, doesn't mean that these foods cause these conditions to occur, right? We know how to reverse type 2 diabetes. We know how to reverse metabolic syndrome with a low carb or ketogenic diet. That doesn't mean a ketogenic diet is required to prevent them from happening in the first place. And when I give my Alzheimer's talk, I use the example of an exterminator coming to your home. If you have an insect infestation in your home, you could call an exterminator and they come and they set off this like toxic bug bomb in your house. Okay, problem solved, all the bugs are dead. However, that doesn't mean that you needed such a dangerous, toxic thing to prevent that infestation from happening, right? You could have taken lower level, easier, safer, protective measures to prevent it from happening. You could have, kept the windows closed. Don't leave unsealed food out on the counter. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that keto is a toxic, dangerous intervention. That's an analogy for the bug thing, that the type of intervention needed to reverse a problem once it's already happened is not necessarily the same strategy that you need or that's required to prevent the problem from happening in the first place. So this is, getting back to keto and children, many of us adults would not need a ketogenic or very low carb diet right now in our midlife if we hadn't done so much metabolic damage in our younger years. Now, I've mentioned in previous videos, my parents owned an ice cream and candy store for 10 years when I was a kid. I was literally a kid in a candy store. And, there's a reason I was a chubby kid. There's a reason I was a chubby little tubby kid. And, maybe if I hadn't spent so many years overeating that junk, I wouldn't need a low carbohydrate diet now, right? Like, many of us need this type of nutritional therapy now because we spent so many years accruing metabolic damage, or whatever you want to call it. If you have a child, you can just feed them a whole foods, non-crap diet, and they'll remain healthy, with exceptions. I mean, this doesn't hold for everybody everywhere. But if you don't induce the metabolic damage your whole adolescence, teenage years, 20s, 30s, whatever, you don't need to reverse it when you're 40, 50, 60, 70. You can prevent it from happening, and I honestly don't think a strict ketogenic diet is required to keep it from happening. Now, if you have a child, unfortunately, in this day and age, we do have toddlers, with metabolic syndrome. We have toddlers with fatty livers. We have toddlers who are hyperinsulinemic. And it's not because they eat too much and move too little. I've made jokes about this, like, oh, what a bunch of lazy fetuses. Maybe we just need to manufacture treadmills tiny enough to implant in the uterus so we can get these lazy fetuses just moving as soon as possible. No. Hell no. The problem is that some of these babies are literally marinating in insulin for 9 months. They are born hyperinsulinemic. They are born basically pre-diabetic. And I didn't invent that term. I think either Dr. Jason Fung or Dr. Ted Naiman said marinating in insulin, and I was like, totally stealing that. But you can see when we have moms who are hyperinsulinemic, we have fetuses that are hyperinsulinemic, and they're born already behind the metabolic curve. And so if you have a toddler who is obese, who has a little fatty toddler liver, then, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm a nutritionist, but in my nutritional opinion, I would recommend a low to very low carb diet, maybe not strict keto, but you want to get that fat out of that liver. You don't want to have them oxidizing carbs all the time because they're eating carbs. You want to have them oxidizing fat, so you've got to get the carbs out of the diet. But if you have a child who's relatively healthy, or just not relative, just healthy, straight up healthy, and active and happy and energetic, I don't think that kid needs a ketogenic diet. I would have that kid just eat real food. And I guess the problem with that is that real food is up for definition, right? We don't really know what that means. Some people would say that, like, a prosciutto or a salami is not real food because it's processed. Like, let's not get so deep in the crazy weeds like that. I just think, do you know what I mean? I don't want to keep harping on it, but is keto safe for kids? Yeah. Do they need keto? Probably not. What they need is a normal, nutrient-rich diet that doesn't totally jack up their blood sugar and insulin all day long every day. You know, every year around Halloween, people on social media get up in arms like, oh, I can't believe, oh, all this candy, oh, how dare you give my kids sugar, oh my God, the birthday party, oh my God, the school cupcakes. Listen, people, the Halloween candy is not the problem. The problem is that we eat, or even the Thanksgiving, the pumpkin pie and the cranberry sauce and the rolls and the sweet potato pie. That's not the problem. The problem is that we eat like it's Thanksgiving and Halloween and Christmas 365 days a year. That is the problem. The problem isn't the once in a while cupcake and pizza at the birthday party for your child. The problem is that they wake up and they have orange juice and cereal and toast. A zillion grams of sugar. A couple of hours later, they're having lunch at school. They're having chocolate milk, they're having tater tots, they're having a burger on a bun, they're having French fries. They come home from school, they're having animal crackers and juice as a snack. Maybe for dinner, they're having pasta and breadsticks. That's the problem, okay? The problem is not the Halloween candy. If you want to do the switch witch and have your kids trade in their candy for money or trinkets or toys, do what you want to do. You know, I made that video about not being the food police. It's none of my business what anyone else does. But, you understand what I'm saying. Like the problem isn't the once in a while thing. So even if your child is on a mostly whole foods, mostly nutrient-rich diet, it's really not that big a deal if every now and then they have the thing, whatever it is, the pizza at the party, the cupcake, the whatever. Now that being said, clearly, things are getting out of hand because it's every other day there's some celebration at school, every other week it's somebody's birthday party, right? So you kind of have to moderate that to some extent because you don't want that happening every, 4 days a week. Like you kind of have to control it to some extent, but you get the general gist. And now that I've said all of that, the biggest thing that I forgot to say, along with my caveat at the beginning that I'm not a doctor and this is not medical advice, I'm also not a parent. I don't have children, so it's really easy for me to talk, big talk, right? Because I don't have to walk the walk. I don't have kids. It is damn hard to feed a child in today's day and age. I know it is. My sister has 2 kids. I have a niece and a nephew, and I sometimes just have to zip it. Because it's none of my business. I'm not my sister's food police. It's none of my business what she feeds her kids. They're happy, they're healthy as far as we know. None of my business what they eat. But so I know it's not easy. I'm not commenting on the ease or the difficulty of trying to raise healthy, nutrient-filled children, but I guess that's all I can say. Let me make sure I didn't. Oh. Yes, I did forget something. This is why we make notes. If you have a child who, maybe you have them on some type of whatever, low carb, lowish carb, paleo, real food, Weston A. Price, ancestral diet, however you choose to nourish your child or children, what I don't recommend is getting on their case about fasting and about macros and about caloric restriction and about meal timing and blah, blah, blah. That's not for children. That fasting is not for a child unless there's a medical necessity and it's being supervised by a doctor. Please don't bring math into your child's diet unless, again, it's a medical diet and it must be formulated a certain way for a medical purpose. You don't need to bring math into your child's diet, into your child's food. Again, I'm not a parent, but we see so often adults who have food issues, whatever binge eating, chronic restriction, chronic overeating, full-blown eating disorders, bulimia, anorexia, because of patterns that were instilled when they were children. Whether it was directly instilled, how many clients have I had that's, my mother brought me to my first Weight Watchers meeting when I was 12, or like my mom put me on my first diet when I was 8. or not even deliberate like that, but maybe comments were made either directly to this person as a child, or that child grew up hearing their parents, their mother or their father, talking negatively about their own weight and their own size and shape. And that gets instilled. You know, if you grow up hearing that message, even if it wasn't directed at you, you heard your mom talking about her own body in a negative way, or her own weight, or you saw what she ate and didn't eat, that can do a lot of very long-term damage. And I'm not a psychiatrist. That's not a nutritionist issue. That's a mental health issue, so I can't really speak to that. I just want to make you aware of that. And so you have to be very careful. Please be very careful when you talk to your children about food, when you prepare their meals, when you talk about your own food, your own diet, your own weight. Just, you know, be very careful about what you say in front of them. Even if, again, even if you're not talking about them, hey, Johnny, you're getting fat, you know, maybe you should lay off the X, Y, and Z. No, like even when you're talking about yourself, oh, you know, honey, I'd really like to lose 10 pounds before that cruise. Just be careful. Be mindful of who's around you and who's listening, those little ears, you know. What else? What else? Yeah, I guess that's it for now. This was longer than I wanted it to be. What a shock. So that's it. I hope that is helpful. Remember that you can support me on Patreon if you are interested in doing that. Patreon.com/2itnutrition. You can support for as little as $2 a month, less than like a latte price. Or if you don't like Patreon, you can support me with a one-time or recurring contribution on PayPal, paypal.com, and you can send it to my email address, 2itnutrition@gmail.com. And I think that's it for now. Thank you for watching as always, and I'll see you next time. Bye.